Hi, I'm Bill Bradley. Join me for a recent excerpt of American Voices. I'm Bill Bradley, and we're back now on American Voices. Dr. Feng Zhang is a molecular biologist who works at the top level of the scientific field in gene editing and neuroscience. But surprisingly, as a child, he didn't even like biology class. In fact, it wasn't until his mother suggested that he take a weekend morning science class that he became inspired by science. As a teenager in Des Moines, Iowa, in a science fair project, he made a scientific discovery which won him $50,000 in prize money, which he used to pay for his tuition to Harvard. Now Dr. Zhang develops technological tools for brain science and gene editing. He's the James and Patricia Poitras Professor of Neuroscience at the McGovern Institute at MIT and a core institute member at the Broad Institute at MIT. Dr. Zhang, here with me now. Welcome to American Voices.
Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell me about that experience in middle school. What was it about that class that sparked your interest in science?
That was a really interesting class for me. So I was in Des Moines, Iowa, and I had just immigrated to the United States from China. And this was a Saturday class for students who are interested in learning about molecular biology. So I was in middle school. I had no idea what molecular biology is. And I went to it, partly because I was just wondering what is molecular about biology. So in the class, what got me really intrigued and hooked on molecular biology is that we watched a documentary movie. I'm being facetious because it's actually Jurassic Park. But to me, it was like a documentary because during this class, the teacher was explaining to us all of the modern concepts in molecular biology. And when watching this movie, all of those concepts are applied in how they were trying to make a dinosaur. They were trying to take DNA of dinosaurs that were trapped in amber and then using molecular biology to be able to resurrect dinosaurs. And a lot of the techniques that they were using were molecular biology techniques, like splicing genes together, making new genes, modifying cells. So really, after learning these concepts that the teacher was teaching us in class, and then seeing how that it can be applied in the science fiction context, that really just captivated my attention. And so it's really that connection of seeing something that we're learning, that teacher is telling us that scientists are now able to do, and seeing how they can directly link to some of these science fiction concepts in the movie. And I thought, this is really amazing. Molecular biology is about engineering biology. And I like to tinker with things, and that really grabbed my attention.
So tell me, when you walked out of that class, did you actually think, hey, that might be something I want to do?
I was really interested. I was still in middle school, so I didn't know what I wanted to be. But that class definitely made a deep impression on me. And then when high school came around, that same teacher who taught that molecular biology middle school class came to me and he said, there's an interesting internship opportunity. And if you wanted to learn more about molecular biology, you can go and intern at a gene therapy lab in Des Moines, Iowa. So I told him that I would love to do that. And then that's how I started to learn about what research is and all of the potential that we can use molecular biology to improve people's lives.
Boy, that teacher had a big impact on your life.
He was, I am incredibly grateful for him. I think he really inspired me to go down this path. And I think I owe everything to him.
So tell us a little bit about your personal journey. You said when you came from China. Tell me about your family and that journey.
So I was born in China and I went to elementary school there. My parents are engineers and my mother immigrated to the United States first on her own. And she was at Dubuque University, sort of doing computer science. And she had the chance to visit some of the middle schools, high schools in Iowa. And when she visited, she saw that the way that teaching was done in America is different than teaching in China. She knew that I kind of like to break things down and take things apart. And she thought that this hands-on type of learning would be really good for me. And so she decided to then stay on in the US and then bring me over. And so I came when I was 11 and then moved to Iowa along with my parents.
And your father came with you.
Yeah, he came at the same time.
Huh. So that's amazing that she was very sensitive to her son to understand what he liked to do and how this education was more accepting of that.
Yeah, I think I'm incredibly lucky to have my parents because they also made a lot of sacrifices. They had very good careers in China, and then moving to the US, they had to kind of reboot their career. And I think they did that because they wanted me to have that educational opportunity.
What was it about American education that they saw you respond to?
I think a few things. One of them is the way that learning is done in the US is more about inspiring the kids to figure out what they are interested in and help them develop their individual interests. Whereas in China, it was more about learning from a standardized curriculum, and there's a lot of memorization and test taking or test preparation involved in that type of learning. The example of the teacher, by the way, his name is Ed Pelkington. So when Ed figured out that I enjoyed molecular biology and then was able to then tell me about these opportunities for high school students to intern, those are the things that are really special about the education system that I was able to experience in Iowa. And I think that is something that is unique here. And Iowa is really a great place to grow up as a kid. So I moved to Iowa when I was 11. I remember before coming to Iowa, I heard from other people that there are more cattle in Iowa than there are human, and that's true. So I was imagining that there would be a lot of cows roaming around the streets, but actually Des Moines is a very nice city, and people were very genuine and very welcoming, and there were quite a few families that kind of welcomed us into life in Des Moines. And I think that whole experience was just really nurturing.
But when you came, you didn't speak English yet. That must have been difficult. What do you remember about that time? Any stories?
So the Des Moines school system had a really great English as a second language program. I didn't speak any English, and I started sixth grade in Des Moines. And probably for the first year, I spent half of each school day in the English as a second language class. But the school system was also really well equipped to help immigrant kids adapt. When I moved to Des Moines, there were also a lot of refugees from Vietnam, from Laos, and then later on from Somalia that also immigrated to Des Moines. And so the school system had developed a way to help these immigrant kids learn English and acclimate to the American school system. So there were these special consultants that the school district had who spoke these different foreign languages. And one of them, who was mostly sort of helping the Vietnamese students learn English, he was amazing. He spoke 8 different languages, and one of them was Chinese. His Chinese is not very good, but it was quite good enough to help me understand what's going on in the different classrooms, because he can just come over to me and tell me a few things in Chinese. And he would follow me and also all of the other students to different classes and help us sort of follow the curriculum. And I think that was also really, really fortuitous for me to be in that certain environment.
So, well, we met many years ago, right?
Yeah, in Iowa. When I was in high school, our government or social studies teacher would encourage us to participate in the election process. And so every 4 years, when all of the presidential campaigns would be coming through Iowa, we would sort of learn about the different candidates, and also the teacher would encourage us to volunteer for the different campaigns. And so this was many, many years ago, probably 1998, 1999, when you were running your presidential campaign in Iowa. I actually volunteered for your campaign. And I remember canvassing from door to door and putting placards and signs in different people's yards and telling them about you as a presidential candidate. And that was really a great experience, because it helped me learn more about what democracy is, about American government system. It was just a really wonderful experience. And that's when I met you, when you came to Iowa to speak about your vision.
Well, thank you, Feng. Thank you for putting up all those signs. So tell me, what is it about what you do that is so exciting for you?
So now I'm a professor at MIT, and I run a lab. And in my lab, we work on developing new technologies for treating diseases. And I think we're in a really exciting period of biology because this idea of genetic medicine is starting to become a reality. Genetic medicine uses molecular biology to be able to correct disease at the root cause. One of the really exciting advances in biology over the past 15, 20 years has been the ability to sequence our DNA. And so the human genome, which is the blueprint for life and is in every single one of our cells, has now been mapped. So there are 3 billion letters in each person's genome. But the genome is not identical from person to person. For example, between you and me, our genomes probably differ in more than 1 million different places. So more than 1 million different letters of our 3 billion letter genome are different. And so as people sequence more and more genomes, they're realizing that there are specific differences in people's genomes that contribute to disease risk. So for example, there are some mutations that will increase the risk for Alzheimer's disease, or some mutations that will increase the risk for cancer. And then there are also mutations that can directly cause the disease. And so there are about 5,000 diseases that are called genetic or inherited genetic diseases, where it's just a single mutation and it can cause a very devastating illness. For example, sickle cell disease, or a lot of sort of blindness disorders, or liver disorders, hemophilia. Those are all examples that are caused by a single gene mutation.
And you can identify the fact that it's a mutation.
Yeah, so by sequencing the DNA, by sequencing our genome, now you can do that for a few $100s. You can figure out whether or not you have that mutation. And so as people start to figure out what are these mutations that cause disease, then the next idea is to go into the genome and be able to fix those mutations. So if the genome is 3 billion letters long, think of it as a book. If you loaded that book into Microsoft Word, you can search and replace and be able to fix typos. And so these mutations are kind of like a typo in that book. So the challenge then is, if the genome is not in Microsoft Word, but instead is in your cells, how do you search in that genome, in that 3 billion letters, be able to find where that mutation or that mistake is and be able to change it? So this is where gene editing comes in. So the system that we've been working on is called CRISPR, and it's basically a search and replace function that you can use inside of a cell.
Kind of like molecular scissors.
Yeah, exactly. So you can program it by giving it a piece of RNA, and this RNA would resemble the mutation that you may find in the genome. And this RNA will guide a protein to find that mutation in the genome, and the protein will be able to modify it. And so this is, in essence, how gene editing works.
So much of your work is about healing diseases and making people's lives better.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, as a boy, were there people in your life who were in poor health or who motivated you in your work to go into this field? Or was it just the excitement of the science?
I think there are definitely many different factors that contributed to it. I think first and foremost, when I was growing up, my parents always kind of inspired me to do something useful for the world. They said, you should make yourself a useful person and you should do something that can help other people. So I think that's been a guiding principle for me in choosing what I do. And then along the way, as I was growing up, I sort of interacted with a lot of different people, and those experiences of when they got sick and how much suffering they went through also affected me. So for example, my grandmother passed away because of cancer. And then also when I was going through college, one of my really, really good friends experienced an episode of psychiatric disease. And that experience kind of led me down to wanting to understand the brain more, so that maybe one day I can try to help people who are experiencing psychiatric diseases like depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia be able to function better in their daily lives. And so I think those are some of the influences on what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm. So when you're busy, when you're doing this in the lab, you're having fun.
Yeah, every day, for sure.
So what do you think about when you go to the lab every day? What am I going to find today, or how am I going to go today?
Yeah, basically. So I work with other graduate students and also postdoctoral fellows. And so I have a small team of researchers who work with me. And so we set out to try to solve a few problems. For example, one of the problems is how do you fix any kind of mutation you want in the genome? And how do we develop a technology to do that? Another problem is, so suppose we have already developed this molecule that can fix mutations in our genome. How do we introduce it to the right cells or to the right organs in our body? How do we get it to go into the brain? Or how do we get it to go into the kidney? So those are some of the problems that we're working on. Being able to solve these problems will help us take genetic medicine to the next level, to really apply it to addressing many, many diseases.
So what are the concerns around gene editing? I mean, if you can edit out the mutation that makes you susceptible for Alzheimer's, does it produce vulnerability elsewhere?
Right. So a few years ago, there was a scientist who used the gene editing to modify human embryos, and then these embryos were implanted back to the mother of the embryo, and then two baby girls were born who had their genomes edited. So that particular incident caused the international, like very strong international scientific and also medical ethics reaction, because it wasn't something that was done in the appropriate way, and it also wasn't applied to a situation where it was medically justifiable or ethically justifiable to do that. So that is one thing that is kind of at the forefront of some of the concerns surrounding gene editing or just genetic modifications in general. And I think that really requires sort of strong international consensus around the ethical use of this technology so that people don't apply it in situations where it's not justifiable. But in the long run, as we understand biology more, sort of figuring out and when gene editing can and should be used will be really critical.
So you got to make sure that the wrong people aren't in charge, right? I mean, there's this one scientist had a dream of Hitler asking about what about gene editing?
Right. So I think it will really be, is it really important for kind of the ethical uses of this, for there to be consensus around how this should be used?
You know, when it comes to your work in brain research, I mean, you've said the following: the brain is still the place in the universe with the most unanswered questions, which is a good way to put it. And I think that statement actually, you know, shows the vastness and greatness of the human mind, but we don't always appreciate that. But can you tell us about what you hope to see answered when it comes to brain science?
I think there are many questions about the brain, but the ones that I find most intriguing and also I think most important is understanding how the brain sort of regulates and processes emotion. And I think that is very fundamental to many of the psychiatric diseases that a lot of people are affected by. So being able to understand what is it in the way that brain cells talk to each other, or what is it in the way that the brain circuitry is wired together that underlies normal processing of emotion, and also what caused the brain to not be able to process emotion properly. For example, if someone is having depression and unable to feel joy for anything in their life, what is this wet towel on the brain that is really suppressing emotion in those people's brains? I think those are some of the things that I think I would really love to understand, and hopefully by understanding it, we'll be able to develop new treatments to help people live better lives.
Well, all I can say, Dr. Zhang, is that I, as one American, am certainly glad that your parents decided you needed to get an American education, became citizens, and you're making such a huge contribution to our country and to mankind. So thank you for being here on American Voices.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator.
I can't wait to hear about more amazing scientific discoveries that make lives better.
Yeah, we're working hard, and I'm really optimistic about the future of science and using science to make our lives better.
I've been speaking with Dr. Zhang. He's a molecular biologist at the James and Patricia Poitras Professor of Neurosciences at the McGovern Institute at MIT and a Core Institute member at the Broad Institute at MIT. To find out more, visit us on Facebook, American Voices with Senator Bill Bradley. And we're also now on Instagram. Hope you'll check us out there too. Follow us. Thank you for listening to American Voices here on my YouTube channel. For more interviews celebrating the goodness and creativity of the American people, click the subscribe button below.